We have a special guest with us today on Politically Entertaining. She's an author, activist, radio personality, and most important, she's a mother, author of Black Matters, Volume 1 and 2. You can purchase the books on ZaZaali.com. You can purchase Volume 1 on Amazon as well. Volume 3 will be coming soon. ZaZa Ali, thank you for joining us today.
Peace. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, we appreciate you on. Dr. Umar Johnson, he's often charged with being a misogynist and anti-gay, and because of that, he has been rejected at some of his scheduled speaking engagements. I know in my hometown of Mobile, Alabama, there was a big controversy with him coming down there to speak, and similar charges have been leveled at you at times for being misogynist and anti-gay. Has that happened to you? Has that happened where you were scheduled for a speaking engagement and people who have, come out and said, no, we don't want her to come? And has any of the criticism that you receive surprised you at all?
Well, no, that's never happened to me. I did have a situation at Cal State, some of the Black student unions from Cal State universities earlier this year, where, some people were offended by some things that I had said. But as far as people rallying to not have me speaking at certain events or venues, no, that's never happened to me. I'm never surprised by the controversy, of course, online,
Right.
All hell breaks loose, but I'm never surprised by the controversy. I mean, we live in a world of deception, and people are more comfortable with the lie and with living a lie and with not having to face and focus on truth. So when you bring truth to the table, when you bring logic, when you bring, realistic conversation to the table, it unnerves a lot of people because unfortunately there are masses of people now, particularly with the internet, who don't use discernment, who don't think logically, and who have no concept of us, preparing for and working towards something for generations coming beyond us.
I see. Now, speaking of controversy, your take on single mothers, it reminds me of a Chris Rock joke that he said one time where, yeah, you can drive a car with your foot, but that doesn't mean it should be done. And he was speaking to women who say, I don't need a man to raise a child. He's saying, yeah, you can do it, but that doesn't mean that it should be done. How do we go from women who are just making the best of a situation that's not ideal to this attitude from some single parents, from some single mothers that take on the attitude of, I don't need a man for anything? How do we get to that point with a lot of women's thinking on that?
Well, those women are putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. It's like you live in a world that is constantly rejecting you, and you don't have the support that you need, and you don't have the basic fundamental, premise and element that all of us are searching for, which is love. I don't care what any woman says. She wants love, and most of us want to be loved by men, and some of us have gone in a different direction, but the basic premise for humanity is human contact and love. And so we're dealing with women who a lot of times have, been dragged through the mud or who have made bad decisions with men. And then you add a child into the equation. And now you are responsible for a child 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You have to sacrifice everything in order to make sure that this child is eating and living and, has what they need. And it puts a heavy burden on women. Being a parent is a two-person job. That goes for single men who are raising children, and that goes for single women who are raising children. That is a two-person job. So anytime you have one person doing 100% of two people's job, it is a very heavy burden. And so now you have women who have, who are bitter and who are angry and who are, trying to, on the outside, appear as if they are carrying the burden with ease, or, rejecting the idea of love because they don't think that love is ever going to come, reach them. And I talk about that in my second book, Plagues of Dysfunction. So, women who have calluses on their heart and who don't really know how to be vulnerable and how to be open. And then, of course, you have, pop culture now is teaching women in different ways, directly and indirectly, that this whole the feminist element, the girl power element, which, of course, I'm all for girl power. I'm all for Black Girls Rock. But I also think that as women, Black women in particular, we have to be just as staunch in our representation of men, our loving and compassion and nurturing for men. That has to be part of the equation in order for us to balance out our communities.
Hey, ZaZa, I'm going to jump in here. This is Frank, and, I've watched a number of your interviews, and they're so thought-provoking, and if you certainly haven't thought of some of the things you said regarding relationship between, white feminism and how it affects, Black people and Black women, things about the cell phones, things about the food, the way it's, I guess my thing is you have so much to digest. Like you mentioned before we even started, like people living a lie, people being comfortable living in a lie. How would you explain to somebody who's young African American who's saying, hey, you know what, I do think that there are some things that I'm missing out on. How can I, obviously you can't get to where you are overnight, but where can I jump in and maybe start to understand some of the misteaching, some of the misinformation that's been handed out for centuries so that I could start to re-educate myself?
Well, that's a great question. I'm really glad you asked that. I'm actually working now. I have a crowdfunding campaign going where I'm going to be doing youth retreats for young brothers and sisters that are growing up in the ghetto and these urban communities that really don't understand the science of themselves and feel like they are loved by the broader communities. And you can get more information on that on my website. But for me, one of the things I volunteer teaching at a juvenile detention center. I've worked with the Boys and Girls Club. I use pop culture as a segue in order to start a conversation. So like right now, I love Kendrick Lamar. I think he is a beautiful, brilliant, talented brother who is way ahead of his time. He's got an old soul. So I'll take a Kendrick Lamar song like Fear and break down the lyrics, put it up on a screen, and just talk about it from beginning to end and get them to open up. I think that's the first thing. And then also, there's a lot of different stories in the news right now. Khalif Browder is one of those that's really, really prominent in my mind. That is a great teaching tool for me. Here you have a 16-year-old brother who gets, stop and frisk in New York, and he ends up spending 3 years of his life in jail, and then he ends up committing suicide. Well, Khalif Browder's story didn't start when he got, arrested. He was adopted. His mother was a crack addict. He grew up in a very poor situation. He didn't have male guidance. His adopted father, walked out on his family. So stories like that they can relate to, I use as a talking point. And then, of course, music and culture and the way we dress and the way we dance and, our rhythm and our hairstyles and things like that, I get, bring them to the table so I can open them up. And then we can start talking about food. Why do you have all that acne in your face? Why is your skin all broke out? You think it's just because you're a teenager, but no. What did you eat for dinner last night? What did you eat for breakfast? Oh, okay. Well, do you know what's in that pork? Do you know that some of the, if you eat oranges that don't have seeds, that can be genetically modified food? And then do you look up in the sky? Do you notice the lines in the sky? Do you think that's normal? Does that look like a cloud? Does that look like, do you know what chemtrails is? So because I'm an avid student, I'm an avid researcher. I love knowledge. I love, I love learning. And so I try to find ways to make learning interesting and make it fun, not just for young people, but for for people in general, our people in general.
Wow, that's an amazing answer. And one of the things that Byron mentioned when he introduced you, when you came out for an interview, he mentioned that you were a mother first and foremost. And I know that you do a ton of stuff. I mean, like I said, I spent about maybe 2 or 3 hours the last couple of days just trying to look at some of the different interviews. I mean, you are very, very generous with your time. And with that being said, how do you balance that with being a mother? And you know how children are. I know you're doing a lot of good work and educating a lot of people, including us as we were talking to you on this interview, but kids want their mother. They don't think, oh, hey, my mom's making a difference in the world. They just want their mom. How do you balance everything you're doing with the weight of what you're doing with just being a mother and being there for your child?
Well, my son's 13 now, so the last thing he wants to do is be in my face. I've had to learn over the past year, even talking to some of my friends, like, my son doesn't want to hang out with me. We don't go to the movies anymore. Like, he's like, Mom, get away from me. You know what I mean?
He's too cool for you now.
He is too cool for me now. His last birthday, I wanted to throw a big party. He was like, no, I just want to go to the mall with some of my friends. I was like, but what about me? You know what I mean? Like, what am I going to do for your birthday? And I was really in my feelings about it. So, but, it's in talking to friends and peers, he's growing at a healthy pace. And, of course, at 13, he's an alpha male. Of course, he's very, independent-minded, and he's got his own. He's a thinker. He's very popular. He's athletic and whatnot. So, he's healthy and he's growing at the right phase. So I just I'm learning to, relinquish cut the umbilical cord and just kind of let him do his thing. And then, come when we need to, watch movies together, go out to the movies, or, like tonight, I'm going to take him out to dinner after I pick him up from the gym, and just, I buy books that I know my son will be interested in. So right now he and I are reading the story of Mumia Abu-Jamal. I just bought him the Dwayne Wade book. He's into basketball.
Yeah.
He loves Allen Iverson, so Allen Iverson is next in my wish list on Amazon. Buying things, getting things that I know that he's interested in to cultivate knowledge. Sometimes I get upset because he's not a reader like me. Like, I'm a nerd for real. And I want him to pick up the books on his own. And so I have to be like, okay, just chill out, ZaZa. Let him be him. Let him be into the thing he thinks he's into, and just plant the seeds, and they'll grow at the right time.
ZaZa, you are a Tupac fan, and your son is a Dwayne Wade fan. So you are all right with me.
All right, I'll take that.
We are talking to ZaZa Ali, activist, radio personality, also author of Black Matters. I fumbled this at the beginning. Black Matters Volume 1 and 2 are available now. You can go to ZaZaAli.com. Volume 3 is coming this summer. I actually just purchased Volume 1. As soon as I finish the new Jim Crow, I'm going to dive into it, because I read like the first chapter and it's already interesting. So I can't wait to get to it.
The new Jim Crow. New Jim Crow is definitely a good book for everybody to read. And isn't it funny how her book came out, and now look at everything that's happening as far as in the prison industrial complex, the situation in Massachusetts right now, and the Khalif Browder story. She was definitely on time with her work.
I was going to say, I don't recommend reading that book and watching that Khalif Browder documentary at the same time. I'm telling you,
Khalif Browder documentary, it ripped a hole in my heart. I'm not even lying. I'm still trying to process. You know what I mean?
Yes, it did. Now, with Black Matters, in your opinion, what wasn't being said to African Americans, or not being said enough, that you were able to express in your first two books? Because originally when you wrote it, it was like a 600-page book, and you decided to divide it up into 3 volumes. Right. So what did ZaZa feel wasn't being said enough to African Americans that we can find in your books?
Well, that first book, The Scientific Intervention in Our Affairs, I mean, that, to me, it's like there's this whole scientific world that's happening behind the scenes, and we're not even talking about it. Like, chemtrails, obviously vaccinations have made more, are a little bit more trending now, as far as because of the situation in California with the law that was passed making vaccinations mandatory. And, people are a little bit more tuned in to what's happening with vaccinations, even though a lot of us are still getting vaccinated with, because they said we should and because they told us to. But, genetically modified food, there is nothing more sacred and important besides the water you drink and the air that you breathe, besides the food that you put into your body, And so me growing up in Oakland and, coming from a family that really didn't place a lot of emphasis on health, once I started to, learn about food, and then I started to learn about genetically modified food, I was like, wait a minute, why wouldn't they only put this type of food in the hood? Why wouldn't they only, send this type of food to poor people, or predominantly poor people? So, the food, and then of course the situation with Kendrick Johnson here in Georgia, where that brother was wrapped up in a mat and all of his organs were removed, and I had already been privy to, some different stories across the country and even the broader market of the organ trafficking around the world. I mean, we're talking about a $100 billion industry where people are actually selling organs and different body parts and skin tissues on the black market. And so I remember I was listening to Dick Gregory one time, and he was saying that, he thought the police were doing some of the drive-bys in Chicago and things like that. And I was like, well, man, that would be perfect. You take a brother off the streets, and then now he's in the medical examiner's, the coroner's office, and, nobody's going to go back in there and double check that work to make sure that those organs or whatnot are still, the body's dead now. The body has no more use for us. But in the broader medical industry, it's big money. And then I started thinking about, wait a minute, you got to have surgeons, you got to have nurses, you got to have, helicopters and people to transport these organs. And, so I think about things deeply like that. So for me, the scientific intervention in our affairs, and particularly crack cocaine, and I talk about crack and its inception because I saw crack, rip half of my family apart, and then what it did to Oakland. I was always like, who, what, when, where, why, and how. That's my scientist mind. So that's what provoked the scientific intervention in our affairs. And eventually, I'm probably going to write a follow-up to that book because there's so many things that I didn't cover. I wanted to write it in simple language so that if a 15 or 16-year-old picked the book up, they would be able to embrace it. And then book 2, Plagues of Dysfunction, I always say that self-accountability is the most important thing for us. I used to really get mad when people would say, white people, black people are our worst enemy. It would frustrate me so much. It's like, what? It's like, don't you know what these people are doing in Africa right now? Don't you know they created crack cocaine? Don't you know that they put guns and drugs in the community? But as I've gotten older and matured now, and I see our behavior, and I see us having opportunities for growth and for, spiritual and mental and emotional development, and we continue to stay stuck in this perverse way of life. There's three subject matters. The first one is Black Girl Loss. The second one is A People of Sport and Play, and then the third one is Message to the Black Man in America. All of this is in book 2, Plagues of Dysfunction. And I just talk about some of the things that we like to pretend is not happening. Black women and weave, and how much money we spend on our hair care, and you can wear whatever kind of hair you want to wear. That's your prerogative. But if we are spending, $100 million, $1 billion a year on hair, and we have African-centered schools in the community struggling, something's not adding up. We have libraries in our communities that are closing, and, our schools public schools are closing down every day. Like, why can't we take some of that money and take some initiative to start being builders in our communities opposed to only being consumers? So that, and just how we spend our money, male-female relationships, vanity, and this weird combination of insecurity and vanity now that you see in a lot of women online, it's crazy. So I wanted to address some of those things and address it from a perspective of, look, I went through some of this stuff. I was materialistic at one time. You know what I mean? I was that girl. So I'm not judging, but we got to get this right.
Final question. So you were materialistic, so you had a pair of red bottoms, ZaZa?
I had a couple of their red bottoms. I had some Chanels, you know what I mean? Yeah, I went through all of that. But you know what? It never made me. That's one thing I can say about me. I had it, but it was never like, you know what I mean? I need this in order to feel secure. I was just flossing at one point in time, but I didn't go through that. You know how sometimes you see women and they got their purses up and they hold it up just so you can see the symbol and all of that. I see that all the time in Atlanta. I was never into it like that. No, I didn't. The purse didn't make me. I made the purse.
I know we're running up against time, so final question. I saw a video where you were critical of Black Lives Matter and their official message. Has anyone from Black Lives Matter reached out to you and addressed what you mentioned at all and try to, come to an agreement on what the message should be?
No. I did have a sister, after the controversy, and I put a video up about the LGBTQ community and when that whole situation at Cal State went down earlier this year, and I had a sister from the Black Student Union reach out to me because she was very disappointed about just the the behavior and the mindset of a lot of our young people, which is what I was addressing, not being able to take constructive criticism, not being able to sit and listen when you have an elder talking to you, whether you agree or not. And that was in response to some of the things Minister Farrakhan said. So that, and there was that Black Lives Matter culture is very prominent now in the collegiate system with the, particularly the Black student unions. But no one has reached out to me. It's interesting because the two sisters who started the group are actually from Oakland. But I don't think that there is a cohesive element in that particular organization that is looking to unify Black men and women. And I haven't seen anything to this point to make me feel otherwise. Now, have they been, vocal as far as discussing police brutality and murders of, different brothers and even sisters and transgenders? Yes. But, it's one thing to be reactionary and to, continuously react to injustices. It's another thing. And this organization obviously now is being well funded by, some other people who don't have our best interest at hand. But it's another thing to take the initiative to start to go out into the community and actually be proactive in creating organizations and programs, in the school systems and in juvenile detention centers and with the prison industrial complex that are actually going to help our people. And I haven't seen anything from Black Lives Matter, that would make me feel that is their intention. So because I am critical of them like that, and that's probably not going to happen, and that's fine. I just want people to start looking at things for what they really are and stop getting so, we jump on these bandwagons because we're having emotional knee jerks, because of the constant injustice. And, you keep seeing brothers getting murdered on TV, and, it's affecting us psychologically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. It's like a constant burden. But, we have to stop having knee-jerk reactions and start being proactive in our communities so that we don't end up with Khalif Browders and we don't end up with, Eric Garners. I say all the time, how many of us would have actually given Eric Garner a job? How many of us would have actually given Mike Brown a job? No, we look at them brothers every day when we pass them on the block and turn our nose up at them. When do our brothers in the community and in the hood and in urban areas become our brothers again? Only when they die. And that's not acceptable. And that's not acceptable when Black Lives Matter does it, and it's not acceptable for us collectively as a people.
Frank said it in his question. You're teaching us some things. ZaZa Ali, author of Black Matters, Volume 1, 2, and 3 will be available this summer. Volumes 1 and 2 are available now. You can pick up 3 this summer. Also visit ZaZa Ali, ZaZaAli.com, ZaZaAli.com. You can read her latest piece on the myths about drinking water. And also she's doing some great things. She mentioned in one of her answers on what she's doing for the youth and how she's raising money to educate them. So you can donate there. Just visit ZaZaAli.com. Check her out. I know you got to get out of here. I just want to personally, once again, thank you for making time for us and coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, brother, for having me. And y'all keep doing what you're doing, educating people, and, always know that there are people that are listening and that are feeding off of that light and that need that guidance and that extra push. So I appreciate you for having me, and I appreciate you for what you do.